And it is 4:05, so I'd like to call the meeting to order for the Business and Education and Business Committee for Tuesday, March 29th. And I'd like to express our gratitude that we are able to meet on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people where we live, learn, and play. First item is the adoption of the agenda. And is there a mover to adopt the agenda? Trustee DeGroot, Trustee Thorne, all those in favor? Opposed, motion carried. Minutes of February 22nd minutes. Is there a mover for those? Trustee Kemmler, I think you were chairing that meeting. Trustee Kemmler moving, Trustee DeGroot seconding. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carried. Nothing on the action list, no petitions and delegations. Education for information. I think we have Margaret Olson is going to be joining us, the District Principal of Human Resources, regarding the 3-year plan. And welcome, Trustee Doman.
Hello.
Welcome, Margaret Olson.
Hello. Thank you, Trustee Hutchins. When I signed over as a panelist, I lost what was being said for a moment. Am I ready to go or?
Yes, you're on next.
Okay, excellent. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. Okay. All right. I assume that's working. Thumbs up? Okay, excellent. All right. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity today to talk to you about our HR 3-year plan. Our role in HR is that of a supportive model, and we have 9 full-time staff here to do that. As a team, we're responsible for all things related to hiring and supporting, and within the last 10 months, and it's almost been 1 year that I've been here, 10 months, the HR department has gone through a significant amount of changes and our structure and how we do things. We've welcomed 2 new people into our HR team, our health and wellness coordinator, as well as our occupational health and safety manager. And we've also looked at some of our roles and responsibilities and done some restructuring to look for efficiency. I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get into the some of our goals and actions. So the operational plan that I'm going to share with you today was built on the HR review that I completed in the spring of 2021. It was a great opportunity to meet people throughout the districts. Many of you I had the opportunity to sit down with and really learn about what people felt about our department and some of the ideas they had for improvement. So our HR operational plan aligns with the 4 main goals of our district operational plan, around learning, Indigenous ways of knowing, culture of care, and future-focused systems. So I'm just gonna pause there. I'm gonna run 2 screens here. So what I'd like to do is just talk a little bit about some of the updates around some of the actions that we've been working on. This year, the HR department has taken on the responsibility of teacher placement, student teacher placements, and we're really excited about that. This year, we've had 78 student teachers placed in the Cowichan Valley schools. And one of the ways that we hope to meet our goal of recruiting and retaining is to meet early with our student teachers, make personal contact, prioritize their scheduling of interviews, and really make a strong connection with them so they want to stay with us after they've finished their practicum. Some of the other ways we've looked at enhancing our recruitment strategies is through changing the way we present at recruitment fairs. We've increased the visibility of our senior management talking about what is important to us around our goals and our priorities and our values, to ensure that our incoming candidates really know what we want and what we're looking for, and making sure that what they are looking for matches. This year, we also did a video that really excited about. It was filmed on March 11th, so more to come on that. But it again is a welcoming recruitment video, and our senior staff participated in that, as well as Dolly. So more to come. We've also increased our recruitment through more use of social media, local online media platforms, the work that we do with communications around our really beautiful posters that go out through Facebook. We're using Indeed, Future, Work BC. Some of them are a little bit challenging because we are getting applications from places like Qatar and not necessarily qualified people. So we are working on that, but it really has expanded our ability to recruit people and get the message out about what a beautiful district we are. Something new we did this year as well is hold a vice principals pool as part of our succession planning. We were very fortunate. We had 32 applicants apply. 2 of them were placed very quickly into positions, and the remainder we have sitting in a pool. Not all 32. I believe we have 8 sitting in our pool. Actually, pardon me, 7. I'm going to move on to our next goal.
Margaret, just before you move on, are there any questions of trustees on this page? I have one question. You mentioned right at the beginning that you took on the placement of student teachers. Where was it housed before it went to the HR department?
It was in 2 different ways. In some ways, VIU connected with schools directly, and it was also being run through our Superintendent Robin Gray's office. Tracy Jones was doing that.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Natural fit for us to take it on, definitely.
Yes. Any questions from trustees on this page? Seeing none, next page, please, Margaret.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so sorry, I need to move my, there we go. I'd already done that, so my apologies. So one of the items of work we've been doing that we're most proud of around our Indigenous ways of knowing is working with the CTVF around an employment equity application. We're very excited that we have met several times, and what the employment equity application is to increase the number of our Indigenous staff within our employee pool. The CTVF is very supportive in principle, and we're working on fine-tuning it. And our Indigenous Ed staff is working with our local Indigenous nations and Métis nations to gather support from them as well. Once the application is complete, we'll be sending it off to the Human Rights Commissioner, and we hope to be able to get that in place by the end of this year. And our goal for next year will be to expand that to CUPE and USW as well. On an ongoing basis, we're working with our on providing a variety of different learning opportunities for our managers and principals. Sorry, I'm struggling with my words a little bit. Most recently, we had 10 school site administrators and managers attend in-service on diversity for hiring, and we intend to continue with those initiatives throughout the 3 years of our operational plan. And our staffing officer is working with our Indigenous education staff to come up with some local recruitment strategies, but that's in a very, very early stage. So those are a few things I wanted to touch on regarding our Indigenous ways of knowing. Would you, Trustee Hutchins, would you like me to stop or continue?
Yeah, just looking for questions from trustees, not seeing any. So all these goals are going to be 21, 22, so you're going to be finishing them at the end of this year?
You know, that was probably a bit Pollyanna when this document was first created. To be honest, we put this together over the summer and the fall, and didn't account for necessarily the impact of our pandemic or 3 cycles of bargaining. So yes, it was a little optimistic, perhaps.
Understandable. Thank you.
You're welcome. So new to the district, I have really appreciated the cooperation, the collaboration, the focus on problem solving when things come up with our 3 unionized partners. And we just, with the CBTF, we a little bit more structure to that, and we have ongoing meetings that occur every 2 weeks to ensure that we can do our very best to support our teaching staff. Our USW and our QP had already had a system in place that was a little bit more structured, but we modeled some of the work they're doing with our teachers as well. This year, as I mentioned earlier, we brought into the HR department the health and wellness coordinator. So in addition to promoting health and wellness and providing initiatives, she also has been working on our disability management, focusing on promoting wellness and, doing our very best to support teachers and USW and QP members and getting back to work as quickly as possible, and ensuring that when they do, that we're providing the support they need so they're healthy at work as well. One of the things we did not take on this year, primarily because of the pandemic, was to really focus on attendance management, because it just really wasn't the time given the pandemic, but that will be a focus moving forward. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Seeing none, thank you. Next page.
Okay.
I'm glad you gave yourself more time on those ones.
Those are big ones. Future focused systems. So we have done a great deal of work on our future focused systems. As I mentioned, we brought in some 2 new staff members, but we've also did quite a deep dive into our portfolios to look for efficiencies and duplications of work that we could change. One of our biggest pushes this year will be to use more effectively the software we have, but also look at purchasing software that will help us do a better job of especially filling vacancies, and that would be around our dispatch system. We do hear, especially from our teachers, that the ability to book their time through dispatch with our neighboring districts has been advantageous for them, and in some situations that means they're not available to work for us. So that's something we're investigating right now. And again, just working collaboratively, they're really working on maps, working our workflow maps to ensure that, what we're doing for QP, if it can be done by somebody else and still be as efficient, we're really working on that.
Margaret, I have a question for you. So the dispatch system or automatic system, I assume that you're looking at, is that in this year's budget? Is there a cost factor to this one? And
yes, there is a cost factor to it, and we are looking at a couple different models that will dovetail with our current software. Unfortunately, SDS, which is our current software system, doesn't have a dispatch module, but they work with other providers. So we learn more about those on Thursday, actually, as we'll get a couple demos. And the other change we've done this year is our HR managers all participate in the growth plan model, and we meet monthly. And I also meet regularly with our managers to ensure that they have the support they need to do their job, and we're making sure that nobody's feeling overloaded and sharing our workload.
so can I go back to the question about TLCs? Because I can imagine how challenging it is, especially during the pandemic. So if you have a provider, will it be put in this year's budget to make it happen? Or is it going to be a recommendation to the board to put it in this year's budget? Or is that a staffing question? Or a staff question, I should say.
Treasurer Sandquist, are you able to respond to that? Thank you.
We haven't yet drafted all the proposals, so we do have a budget presentation tonight, and it's to get to the starting position, but we'll be bringing back proposals for the board to consider and aligning those to the strategic priorities. And those will come on the April 14th special BEBC meeting. So if it's going to be presented, that's when it will come to the board for consideration in next year's budget, but it's not built into the framework as of this time.
Thank you. Any other questions of Margaret at this time? Margaret, any closing remarks? Nice work, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome. No, thank you. We have a great staff here, and they really do work hard to support all employee groups, and I'm really fortunate that I was able to join the team. So thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. More to come on this.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, we're on to 6.2, Mill Bay Nature School. Kim Ondrick.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, Kim.
Hi, how are you, Rob?
Very good, thank you.
Good. So should I just go ahead?
Yes, please, it's your show.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so it's my pleasure to share with you again the ideas that we've had to add a new clan to our school that includes and that's growing with the age of our students presently. I'm not sure, am I able to share? Oh, I can share my screen. Okay. There we go. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so as you know, Mill Bay Nature School is a public school of choice in the Cowichan Valley, and that we've been putting down deep roots since our start 4 years ago. Co-composing a new learning and teaching community with Hul'qumi'num elders and residents, Tusilum and Saltsamayful, knowledge keepers or knowledge holders, Stuart, Pegwan, John George, Louis Sylvester, Sonia Charlie, Ernie Rice, Mariah Sylvester, Laura Antoine, Darla Peters, with brave and future-focused parents, dedicated, passionate, and courageous educators, supportive district leadership, and our Hahasmanem, our secret children, whom we center in this work together. So we're presently offering unique learning and growing experiences for children of elementary school age, including our blended clan, using the beautiful and robust BC curriculum as our guide, and the village and natural world as our rhythms, and body, mind, heart, and spirit as our structures. And so we really are excited to look at the development of what we're calling Kwikwil Zitse, which means let's talk in Hul'qumi'num, which is designed with adolescent growth and development in mind, grades 6 to 9. Kwikwil Zitse will begin hopefully in September with one clan of grade 6 and 7 age students who are willing to take up a 3 or 4 year commitment, supported by educators with unique passions, strengths, and competencies. So the reason why we want to expand into what would be sometimes called middle years, but we're looking at a clan, one group of students, is that we've had a lot of parents and students here actively advocating for a continuation of their children's learning based on the principles and the philosophy and the pedagogy of Mill Bay Nature School. And so as a staff, we've been looking at, not just as a staff, also with our elders in residence, looking at what would that look like here? How would we challenge students who are developing into adolescence? How would we challenge them? How would we provide a really robust program so that they could continue with the work that many of them now have started since kindergarten? We're looking at what are the philosophy and practices in that have been researched and studied for a number of years. That's along the left-hand side of this image. Just what do adolescent learners need that's different from pre-adolescent learners or adult learners. And then also looking at the weaving the sideways words, which are the principles, the Hull Communum principles that we've really been, as a staff and community, been developing in our students. So the idea of things taking the time they take, allowing room for students to grow and develop, and not being rushed, walking gently with ourselves, with others, and with Mother Earth. Sitza Watzel, helping one another or working together. Kashintal, which is walking together. Aisqualawin, which is working with a good mind and spirit. And Natsamat, which is the principle of we are all one, we're all connected, and we look after each other. So we are, we're feeling really good about this, and think that we have something of value to offer to learners and families that are looking, both who are presently in our school, but also for some students who are not. And it opens up some space to have some new voices, new perspectives, new families join our community here. So I think that's what I wanted to share with you.
Thank you, Kim. So how many, so this will be now a K-8 school?
I guess, well, initially we're looking at including students next year who are like going into grade 6 and 7, because we're hoping that we can keep those students in a cohort for a number of years together, because we know from research that really, that time together is of great value, and we're not, eventually those kids would move into grade 8 and 9, but we don't want to just have students for 1 year in that for a short period of time, because it takes the time, it takes time to build relationships, and to get to know the learners well, and for them to get to know us. So initially it would just be till grade 7. But that program would be into grade 9 eventually, yeah.
Right, grade 9, okay.
Yeah. And the BC curriculum is a K-9 curriculum. So it's in keeping with the philosophy of the curriculum, in looking at development as going from kindergarten to, a 14 or 15-year-old. So, yeah.
Thank you. Questions from school trustees? I have another question. So next year, if you have a clan of 6, 7, right, how big is that clan?
So be in keeping with numbers, like composition numbers, class numbers, which would be, I think, around 27 kids. That's what we would want to have.
But is that clan, when they go the following year, so they would be 7, 8, or would the clan be expanded so it's 6, 7, 8?
6, 7, 8.
Okay, 6, 7. Okay.
Yeah. And it's in keeping with how we've discovered here that because we don't identify students as grades, but instead look at them developmentally where they're at. And there's some kids that need to spend more time with working with literacy or numeracy. And then there's other kids who are a lot more developed. So that there's a bit of fluidity around placing kids where they can learn best. And so we're hoping to have an interview process with registering for this new program, because we can see that the children and families need to interview us, and we need to interview the kids, because we're really looking at really robust, self-directed learning that's in the community and with mentorships and that kind of thing. And so we have to make sure that families understand that, kids understand the commitment, and it's not just a natural next step. Because we can see a recommitment to our school by families and by kids is a good idea. And so that we can see with families, because this is a new way of looking at education, that always thinking about what does this, my child need, and what's going to help them grow and develop is a really critical part of our role in children's lives and in families, you know, in their world and in figuring out things for their kids, with their kids. So.
Thank you, Kim.
You're welcome.
Trustees, any questions of Kim at this time? So we do have a recommendation on your agenda that the Board of Education and Business Committee recommends that the board approve the Mill Bay Nature School new clan concept for the 22-23 school year.
So moved.
Thank you, Trustee Thorne, seconder. Trustee DeGroot, any discussion on that? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Kim.
Oh, thank you very much. Haichka, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Next up, we have Alison Keppel with the International Student Program Change of Fee Structure.
Hello,
Afternoon.
trustees. Good afternoon. Haichka for having me here. Just going to share my screen to start. Okay, so I'm here to talk about our international student program fees for the 2023-24 and 24-25 school year. So we need to publish our fees more than one calendar year in advance. So for example, our fees for the 22-23 school year were set over a year ago because many of our agencies that we deal with publish their materials over a year in advance. And so they need to know our rates well ahead of time. So we have had a very from the COVID-19 pandemic. We have diversified our program. As you know, it used to be probably about 75% in the Asian market, primarily in China. And now, like many places in BC, we are seeing, you know, a strong interest in countries from all over Europe, in particular, Germany, Spain, and Italy. We are very strong in Japan. South America and Mexico are starting to open up again, and we are working on new markets like Norway and Turkey. And we've got 17 different countries represented in our program this year. We're also one of the few programs in the province that have 3 and 4 month stays. And this helps us attract and retain some agent partners. And sometimes those short-term students end up staying for a whole semester or a year once they're here. So I just have on my screen in front of you our current fees, as well as our proposed fees for the 23 and 24 school years. We've added a modest increase to the transportation, which is the school bus fee. All of our students ride the bus to school, and a bigger increase to our homestay fee. And because of these increases, we are recommending just a modest increase to our tuition fees of $250 a year over those 2 years, just so we don't increase our prices and sort of price us out of being about the mid-range on the island where we comfortably sit right now. So the transportation fee is really just a recognition that gas prices have increased, and that's similar to the increase in the homestay fees, a recognition that gas and groceries and pretty much everything that we're doing now is more expensive. You know, inflation is in the news as being the biggest jump in 30 years. And so we need to recognize that our homestay families are facing increased pressure on just the cost of hosting students. So we currently, our homestay fees are $900 a month, and we're proposing to raise them to $1,000 a month to help cover some of those. We also have some other fees that we are proposing increasing or adding. So we have currently a report card validation fee of $125. What that is some countries, in particular Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, Spain, require a validation process to for transcripts and report cards, and we charge $125. Most districts are charging $150, so we would like to bring that in line with what other districts are charging. We charge $300 a month for a celiac diet, and we're saying leave that the same. We currently do not charge for vegetarian or vegan diets. Other districts do, so we would like to charge $150 a month going forward, starting in 2023 for that, for a couple of reasons, partially because of that increased food costs that we've been talking about, but also partly because we've had many students this year sort of decide partway through their year here to become vegetarian. And this has sort of caught our host families a little off guard. They weren't really prepared for that. So we're thinking that by implementing a fee, it might cause the students to sort of think twice before making these decisions that affect their host family. And then lastly, we have an additional night in the homestay fee. So for students who arrive before September 1st, right now we charge $32 a night for any night before September 1st. And for any student who stays after June 30th, we charge $50 a night. That's a little bit confusing for both our office and our agents. So we would like to just streamline that and charge $50 a night, regardless of early or late arrivals. And then for our 3 and 4 month programs, the fee increases that we're proposing take into account the transportation, tuition, and homestay increases in the fees above. Does anyone have any questions about these proposed increases?
Thanks, Allison. Very comprehensive questions, trustees. Allison, that makes beautiful sense. So no questions. There's a motion before you, trustees, that the Board of Education and Business Committee recommends to the board that we approve the 2023-24 and the 2024-25 international student program fees.
So moved.
Thank you, Trustee Thorne, seconded by Trustee Kimmler. Any discussions on that? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Thanks, everyone. Hichka.
Take care.
Have a nice evening.
6.23 on your agenda is Early Learning and Childcare Committee. I'm not sure who is speaking to this one.
I am Trustee Hutchins. Unfortunately, Associate Superintendent Kors is unable to be here this afternoon, so I'm going to stand in her stead. Okay.
Thank you.
So in front of the board today, you'll see on page 15 that there is a briefing note with regard to an early learning manager exempt position. And you'll see in the background here that we know that the Board of Education established early learning and childcare as a priority in their strategic plan in the learning section from a very long time ago. We're also well aware that early learning and quality childcare sets the foundation for lifelong learning, behavior, and health. We also know that in the Cowichan Valley region that we have had a shortage of childcare spaces for as long as we can all remember. And we know that there was a childcare study commissioned in 2020, and it discovered that 1 in 5 families in the Cowichan region has an unmet need for childcare. And so that report recommended that we needed to increase the number of childcare spaces in Cowichan region. We also are aware that early learning and childcare will be moving to the Ministry of Education as early as April 1st of this year. And the intent would be that Childcare BC plan would deliver core services of childcare to all of our families. And so this encompasses the increasing number of childcare facilities in the community, also the number of early childhood childcare educators, and also providing an affordable option for our community and our families. And so down below, you can see in the discussion area, we have a number of initiatives on the go. We have 5 new childcare centers that are currently being put in operation, where we are looking to put in not-for-profit organizations to support these childcare centers. This past year, we have piloted an out-of-school care program at Bench Elementary. And we also know that we have 6 Strong Starts and 2 Strong Start outreach programs. So a number of initiatives underway here within our district to support this childcare and early learning endeavor. So we're well positioned to move forward, but we also know that this is a lot of work, and there is a lot of work that has to be done around all of these areas. And so what we would be looking at is hiring an early learning child care lead or manager who actually has the technical expertise that currently doesn't exist within our school district. And so this person would be responsible for 3 particular areas. And you can see here quality assurance, partnerships, and engagement and operations. And so you can see that around quality assurance, that we have an early learning review action plan. So if you recall, we have a number of actions that need to be actually put together in order to support that quality learning opportunities for our youngsters before they hit kindergarten. And you can see within there as well, we work with a number of nonprofit managers and ECEs at each of our childcare and Strong Start centers. We also need somebody to be looking at draft policy and administrative procedures for early learning and childcare as it grows. Underneath partnerships and engagement, you could see that with the expansion of our out-of-school care in more of our schools, which is really the intention of the Ministry of Education around how do we actually provide opportunities for our families to drop their children off at a school site in an early childcare and learning center, and then also pick them up at the end of the day, along with perhaps siblings who might be going to the elementary school. So an easy opportunity for families to get quality childcare. And then, of course, there's a number of things that need to occur within these circumstances, which is around coordinating inspections for licensing. It's looking at how do we possibly transition some of our QP ECEs into our Strong Starts? How do we collaborate with early learning coordinators? And a number of things such as liaisoning with childcare resources and referral and the new Ministry Regional Center, which are currently being developed. And then within operations, a number of things there. It's around parents and contracts and payments, and also act as a manager for our out-of-school programs. So this is probably just a short list, actually. I think that the list is much longer and greater, but if you put it into these particular themes, there is enough work for probably more than one person to do. But we also now know that within the district, we have a support network already established, but we certainly need somebody with that technical expertise to come in and potentially look at how we can continue to grow our programs and provide the quality that's necessary as we move forward. So there is a recommended action for this Board of Education to consider. And so I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Any questions, trustees? Superintendent Gray, I have a question. It doesn't sound like we have a choice on this. We've already proceeded down this track, both provincially and locally. If we don't put this in the budget, how will the scope of work get done if we don't?
Well, it certainly has been done already, and we have a fantastic associate superintendent and early learning coordinator along with our partners. So we have early years table and so on and so forth. But I think it's an area that has always been a gap. And so right now, the Ministry of Education recognizes that gap along with MCFD. And so you're absolutely right. We're going in that direction provincially and locally because it's become apparent that this is an area of need that is necessary for us to provide great opportunities for our learners over time.
Trustee Domi, you have a question?
Is there a payback from the province for doing this?
That is an excellent question. Yes, there is. And so when we look at our out-of-school care at Bench, they actually pay us for us to actually do this work. And so do the parents. And so there's a little bit of a push and a little bit of pull. And so it doesn't cost us any more money beyond maybe us hiring an individual to lead this work. But it is definitely supported by the parents. And of course, there's also the $10 a day provincial initiative that's underway as well.
Trustee Dolan?
So is it kind of a revenue neutral position, or will we be subsidizing it through our regular budget?
It's an excellent question, and I may attempt to answer it, and then I'm going to pass it over to our Secretary Treasurer. We are hopeful and optimistic that as the Ministry of Education brings forward this work and works with the MCFD, that there would be some additional funds that come our way. But at this point, there is not. It would be more about the quality of service to our families and our communities. And so right now it's quite limited, but I think as we move forward, that may change. Did you have any other comments, Secretary Treasurer?
No, other than, you know, we're 2 days away from the Ministry of Education becoming the Ministry of Education and Childcare. And currently the financial structure, funding structure doesn't recognize the childcare component, but that's currently. So we question, it would be funded from the operating budget for next year, but in the future, I would hope that as that becomes school district business, there'll be some funding that comes through the ministry.
Trustee Dom.
What will those costs be?
Trustee, I'm sorry, Mr. Franklin.
We'll bring that as part of the budget options. If this motion that's here is approved, we'll bring that as part of the budget options on April the 14th. I'm going to approximate this. I believe that the position will be an exempt position, and will likely land around the $85,000 a year mark, which will add benefits to bring it just over 100. I'm going to guess that's where BCPC will benchmark it.
Trustee Dolan.
And are other districts doing the same thing?
Mr. Sanquist.
They're starting to. We have seen a few postings for similar positions through the HR circulars that come out through Make a Future and BCPC. So I know that districts are beginning to assume this work.
Trustee Dolan.
So once again, we put a bunch of money into this already, which we don't know how much we put into, and now we're going to add another 85,000 plus, and with no idea as to whether we're going to get a return on that from the province. So it's going to come directly out of our operating budget. We'll have to take from somewhere else. Is that right?
Mr. Sanquist.
I mean, it will be a balance of priorities as boards make decision, as the board makes decision around the 2022-2023 budget. So I would answer that yes, it would come out of operating funds. And there are many ways to find that in an operating budget of approximately $90 million.
But the province wants us to do this, but they're not willing to kick anything in for it.
Mr. Trustee Dolan, the ministry is changing its mandate and its scope of work, and so
yes,
it
I
actually
understand that.
So I think Mr. Sanquist answered your question, is that they're expecting, as with the scope of work change and the title change, that there'll be appropriate funding.
Yeah.
In the future.
You hope.
I don't know. There's nothing announced yet from the Ministry of Education and Childcare. That's why I mentioned that for this budget, it would come out of the operating budget. What that looks like in future years is, crystal ball.
Trustee Thorne, and welcome to Trustee Croft.
This has been talked about at every AGM for the last 3 years, and we all knew it was coming. And it's in its early stages. We're just starting to grow with us. Yes, we'll have to put some money in, but I have every confidence that once it's been structured, then we'll start getting the money, because MCFD is at the table with BCSTA. So I think if everybody looks at it from that point of view, we'll be okay. And I think we will be okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Croft?
Sorry, can you hear me? I've just signed on.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I just to support what Trustee Thorne has said, and that is that we kind of knew at the committee level that there is some risk in this, but we were also kind of at the forefront in getting things rolling. So we probably recognized this need perhaps a little earlier than the system at large. So I guess, yeah, I think part of this decision is deciding whether or not to take a bit of a risk on whether or not future years or even this year will be funded. But we also have the mandate in early education, and in order to do it properly, we need the professionals at hand to execute it in any meaningful and professional way.
Thank you. Any other questions? Trustee Kimler?
I think something that we haven't mentioned here is that it'll free up our associate superintendents to do the jobs that they were actually meant to be doing, and they've been taking on this childcare with a ferocity so it works for us, and so we can get our childcares up and running. So we've already been spending the money, only in a different way, and we'll now get a much more, if we had this, a much more rounded, I don't know what the right word is, but our senior admin would have a more likely ability to do all the jobs that we're expecting them to do.
Thank you. Superintendent Gray.
Yeah, I just want to make a final comment around the 5 childcare centers. And I think that was an endeavor that occurred about 3 years ago, where we put in an application process to actually put these brand new units on each one of our 5 elementary school sites. And, you know, they're happening, they're getting positioned, and they're moving forward. And we are working on a number of RFPs to put our non-for-profit organizations into those areas. And so, you know, when we started that process, looking at those applications, we knew we're going into that business. And so it was certainly the infrastructure was brought in, and now we're moving forward, but it is really around that quality assurance. So the amount of energy and time that our staff have put into orchestrating those units, putting childcare centers in it, creating some of the RFP and the service agreements, it's been a ton of work. And so I think that we're very poised, we're very positioned. And I think that what we want to do is continue that good work around, here's the facility, here it is now for families. But now here we need to continue the professional learning, the professional development, the licensing that goes with that, along with our early learning framework. And I also think it's around the board's strategic priority. It was something that was very important to the board around early learning and how do we support that. We're getting good at it, and I think we can even become more proficient at it and even excel at it. And that is going to look, I think it's going to provide great learning results for our little learners who will be entering into kindergarten in the future.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments by trustees before we go to the motion? Trustee Croft.
Just quickly, I hope I didn't imply that we weren't doing a good job at the moment. That was not my intention. I apologize if I misspoke.
Thank you. Okay, we do have a motion before you, but I am concerned about it. In another life, I would have called this a wimpy motion, because it really is not a motion, because it's asking the board to consider rather than giving it a recommendation to do it. So I would like you to consider this motion, but strike the word consider and say, and create a new early learning manager's position. And the board will consider that recommendation, not to consider. Trustee Croft.
So moved, as voiced by you.
Thank you. And seconded by Trustee Thorne. Okay, so Mr. Sandquist, we've got it as school district number 79, create a new early learning manager position in the 22-23 budget. And not get rid of the word process, period. Mr. Sandquist.
Yes, so I would understand that when it comes to the board, that is a certainty once the board approves that motion at next week's board meeting, and to incorporate it into the budget as one of the additions.
If the board so chooses.
Yes, right. If approved on next Tuesday, it is in the budget.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. It has been moved and seconded. Calling the question, all those in favor? Opposed? Trustee Doman opposed. Motion is
No, I
carried.
was in favor. I was
Oh.
just slow.
Thank you, Mr. Doman, Trustee Doman. Okay, moving on to business and operations, and thank you, Superintendent Gray. Year-end projection. Mr. Singh.
Thank you. I'll start with this share screen.
Mr. Sanquist, before we start, for some reason this meeting indicated it was from 4 to 5. Is there a reason why it was set that time? I mean, otherwise you've only got about 7 minutes to do your job.
Yeah, I can't do it in 7 minutes. In fact, I think I'm going to need closer to 30. So
Okay, thank you.
I hope everybody's fine with that. Here I go. I'll go as quickly, but we do actually have some pretty significant budget information that's going to follow this projection, and I don't want to rush through that. So I'm going to begin with the projection. As the board know, we prepare a monthly projection to try to get a handle on where we think we're going to be at the end of the school year. And it's important to do so, one, from a financial control perspective, and secondly, to ensure that we're not in a deficit position, and also to look at what funds may be available to assist in future years. We don't budget with the intention of having a surplus, but things happen. So when we set the budget earlier in the year, we set 1.5 million for international student program revenue, and we later amended that in the amended budget in February to 1.8. It's coming in at 2.15, which is a variance of 352,000. Under miscellaneous revenue, this 80,000 mainly relates to ISP, registration fees, transportation fees, homestay fees, etc. As we begin the registration process for next year, it's been exceeded. And it's not the only item in miscellaneous revenue, but it's predominantly related to the international student program. Under rentals, we have done very well. We weren't sure we would be reopening for school rentals. They have, but we also, the board did a significant rental on Charles Hoey this year, which has added to the revenue. So we have exceeded our rental projection by 30,000. So we're projecting, not yet knowing what our February count or May counts are. So I need to be, caution that the February count is due on Thursday, the funding update. We do know the student numbers, but they haven't been built into the ministry's financial estimator for the grant. So this number could change. We're projecting being on budget for provincial grant, could change, but right now we're looking at 570,000. Really close on principals, we're projecting a $3,000 surplus on 6.3 million, 60,000 on teachers on 37 million. Those are so close. Under education assistant and clerical, combined, we're just over 400,000, and I'm going to note that a little bit later as we go through the budget process to why I think that's happening and propose a fix there. USWs within 76,000, excluded just slightly over, but casual replacements, even putting in another 150,000, we're looking at about $51,000 over budget at the moment. Off to a really good start this week, but we'll see. Hopefully that trend continues. So in fact, that would put us significantly over last year, but it was a pretty rough February and January with the Omicron variant, very rough. So overall, $494,000 on $68 million budget. Benefits, 363,000. Projecting being over in supplies for a couple of areas. That is where we keep our fuel. And if you've been to the gas pump lately, it is not what it was at the start of the year, what we would have projected for running our bus fleet. So we're seeing quite a bit of overages in our diesel. Also in building materials for maintenance. So again, lumber, plumbing fixtures, electrical supplies, all seeing a significant inflationary pressure this year. And I'll talk about that when I get to the budget. So we see a surplus, a net surplus of about 600,000 on 94 million in the expenditure side, and that nets to approximately 1.2 million. So I'll bring that into the budget presentation that I have next, but that is showing that we're projecting that the board is in good shape, and we'll have some funding to contribute to next year. There's no questions. I'll go to the budget.
Thank you.
Okay, I just need to move this here. Get to my first slide. Okay. Show beginning. So I'm hoping you see a complete screen of a slideshow with the nice slide that Mike prepared for me.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Okay, here I go. We always start by grounding ourselves in the budget guiding principles. They are the principles that the board has set for the establishment of the budget and for considering any changes to the budget. So I like to say that the budget is the district's financial plan for the following year, and it allows for detailed and public monitoring of expenditures as we go through the process. So the principles are here, and these have been approved by the board. They talk about funding the strategic priorities, using the budget as a mechanism to aid in reconciliation. We have accounting for uncertainties of the global 19 pandemic and effects on the school district. So I'm going to highlight that a little bit later. We talk about transparency, and we have a lot of meetings coming up, public meetings, partner group meetings, liaison meetings. We have advisory meetings and many public BEBC meetings. Talks about being developed on the principle of equity. Of course, we need to comply with the School Act and collective agreements and board policy. New is considering multi-year implications of decisions. So that's come through some direction from the province, and we'll get into that as we look at surplus utilization. Balancing short and long-term priorities, and then maintaining an appropriate contingency balance. Also like to start the year of looking at the budget as ensuring that we're always keeping the priorities in mind, learning Indigenous ways of knowing, cultural care, and future focused systems. And as we go through the options on April 14th, we'll want to align to those, and we'll want to present to the board how those options align to those priorities. So this is what I wanted to tell you about. The main theme of this year's budget is inflation. It's happened to the district this year, resulting in some of those overages that you're seeing in the accounts. But there's some significant pressures coming due to inflation on next year's budget. In reviewing how the grant is calculated, about 90% of it comes from the number of students, and about 10% of it comes from just being a school district. We had projected and shown the board an early projection of about 36 FTE net. So then I say net because that's between the May, February, and September count. The September count's actually a bit higher, but we had to make some adjustments in February due to distributed learning. And once that FTE is determined, we apply the ministry grant formula. Really important, there's no changes to the per pupil level for next year announced in the preliminary grant. So for inflation, there's no additional funding within the provincial grant funding. There's our enrollment estimate, and you can see for the next year, it goes up a little bit more than it does this year. Of course, that always changes as we learn more about the future, but we're basing the budget on 8453 FTE. I want to show you the prior 2 years and the current year of funding. Here you see a table that shows you zero change. If you want to ask why there's 4% here, we had 2 years of teacher funding come in at once. So the funding for teacher wage increases, they were unreconciled prior to COVID, and then they hadn't completed bargaining prior to COVID, and then did settle at a rate, and then it came into the grant. But nothing for the next year so far. Well, it won't be. This is what's been announced. This is a comparison of the grant. It is up.
Mr. Sanquist, I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand that. Can you just go back to the last slide? So you said That in
Mhm.
21-22, we got 2 years of funding.
Yeah, we got, they rolled in, they kept the first year of the teacher wage increase outside of the per pupil amount. It came as a separate grant allocation. And then it all rolled into the per pupil amount, which meant that we had 2020, 2021 teacher funding and 21-22 teacher funding put into the per pupil. The 2020-21 was outside of the per pupil amount. It came as a lump sum.
After the fact.
Yeah, the bargaining didn't conclude until after the budget was set.
Okay, and so they have given nothing for 22-23?
That's correct. I'll get into the unknowns that we still have around provincial bargaining. But at this time, they've given the boards nothing for inflation. But inflation is at the highest level it's been in a long time. I was going to say decades, because I think it actually has been 2 decades. But this will be the story that you'll hear about from most boards during this budget cycle. Is things are really expensive right now, but we have no additional funding.
Thank you.
This is what the grant looks like. It is up by $460,930. We'll post this presentation so people can follow through. The big thing is, our unique geographic factors are up by about 153,000. And then they all kind of net up and down. The basic September enrollment's up 399. But then we're down on unique student needs supplements. Number of students that are projected with designations is down slightly. So that net 460 will show up again in my presentation, but it's here for comparison of the grant. And I've just mentioned this. I think I just said it's about $460,930. The increase is due to modest student enrollment growth and unique geographic factors. Not included BCTF, QP, and USW wage settlements. Those are still at the provincial level, and it's anticipated that the board will see that funding come in as a special Ministry of Education and Childcare grant. We know from our previous experience that they do this not on a local level. They don't actually look at the cost for particular boards. They do it on a provincial level, and they allocate funding on a best guess distribution on year per pupil. There's winners and losers in that calc, and we won't know what those are until that is settled. Looking at the funding, 90% comes through those provincial grants, because the local education agreement, the funding that comes from the nations is carved out. It then comes through a separate billing cycle. So if you want to really look at what the local students generate, it's about 97.35%. 2% comes in from international student program tuition. And then we have some other revenues that are small in there, like investment, rentals, etc. Where is it spent? We spend the majority of it on instruction. If you were to look at this pie chart and compare it to some other school districts, I think our blue section is probably a little bit bigger, which is good. Those are resources going straight into classrooms. District admin 3.7, operations and maintenance 11.19. That's a pretty standard amount. Transportation 3.15. That varies so drastically depending on rural versus urban. But this is our distribution for starting this budget. Pretty consistent with last year. And then how are resources allocated? We are a 90% wages and benefits school district in the preliminary budget. Utilities 1.7%. It's hard to turn off the heat. Services, most of that is related to tuition for the dual credit program. But the big thing is we're still about a 90-10 split. Okay, so now I want to talk about the inflationary pressures. And the first one is statutory benefits. I'll go right to the bottom line. We're projecting an increase of about $261,000. Canada Pension Plan rates have been announced. They are increasing by from 5.75% to 5.95% effective January 1st. What that means is that many of our staff, like a teacher at the top of the pay band, just typically paid all their CPP premiums by around July 1st. That means that they're almost entirely at 5.95% in this budget, because I'll start paying again in January. So that's one. The second is employment insurance premiums are currently set at 1.58%. Doing some sort of speculation and research, we're projecting 1.63. You know, that hasn't been announced yet, but we're concerned of the draw on that fund, and 1.62 is what it was 2 years ago. So we do think it's going to be returned there. If it doesn't, then we've over budgeted by a little bit, but it's not a massive percent change that we've looked at there. And then WorkSafe, again, we know that the base rate is increasing. It doesn't have anything to do with the district's performance, but WorkSafe have been operating on a surplus that they're gradually depleting. And so they have a 5-year plan to increase the rates until that surplus is gone. WorkSafe is also under a significant amount of financial pressure due to COVID claims. Individuals who claim for WorkSafe rather than sick leave when they've got COVID at work or believe they've got COVID at work. So that's about 261,000. This is the big one, health benefits. This year, the board enjoyed a really big credit of about $400,000, which isn't there anymore. It was a credit because the previous year was the COVID year, the first year, and nobody went to the dentist, physio, chiropractor, etc., massage. So the premiums weren't spent. They were paid out to to Pacific Blue Cross, but they were never, we overpaid, the board overpaid. And so there was this big credit. So that credit doesn't exist anymore. And that's about $400,000 of that $669,000 cost pressure. We already know that CUPE's rates are up 18.37%. We've been told that by the benefit provider, and USW up 7.6%. We've used 10% for teachers, kind of split the difference. And that's what we built the budget on at this point. We won't know that likely until probably sometime in May. You know, it may even come after the budget process has been concluded. So we believe we have a budget pressure of about $669,000 in health benefits.
Is that, if we go back prior to COVID, what was the rate in relative terms then? I mean, is this 18% over last year because last year went down?
Yeah, that's right. It's 18.37% over last year because last year went down.
Okay.
And I think there's an echo effect here now of a lot of catch up. You know, that 18, they set last year's rate, or this year that we're in, this year's rate was set based on non-COVID expectations of usage of plans. But it's possible that we debriefed with the benefit carriers, but they didn't get into the specifics. But if I was to speculate, I would say people are making up for lost time and now getting the services that they haven't had for some time. And that's reflected in the benefit cost. So that's one. And now I'm going to move on. The budget has had an increase of students, and with that, we need to put additional teachers in. So I have put in an additional 1.8 FTE using a ratio of approximately 1:20 with a cost of $170,000. Second item is teacher pay structure. So teachers may increase their education and move between the bands, or they may get more experience, not have been with the board for 10 years and move up every year, a pay band. So those increments, when we've done the calculations on them, have cost about $391,000. They can sometimes be offset by retirements. If you get retirements, you have less expensive teachers that offset the other teachers going up. Those numbers aren't really that high so far. COVID considerations. This year's budget added in a $200,000 one-time COVID initiative, and that was to increase the electrostatic sprayer program and add more supplies. So we've taken that out of the first draft because it was a one-time in last year's budget. It will be brought back for consideration in the budget process, but I just wanted to show you that we don't have it in the first budget position. We've also added $150,000 to the amended budget, and that was for absenteeism. We've left that. I've shown you in the projection that we're already going over that. But we left that in. Also, $150,000 was added to the hydro budget. We're also going over that. And that was related to all the improved ventilation in the schools. So we've left that in. But we know the board may want to consider adding a contingency for COVID, not knowing what's going to be expected with safety protocols in the fall. And we'll bring that when we come back to the next meeting with recommendations. Another inflationary pressures. We believe we need to increase our diesel budget simply because fuel rates per liter have just gone too high. Software licensing continues to be a significant expense and increases annually. Increased quite significantly based on needing to update our next generation network and our BEBC license fees. So those budgets have been adjusted based on an announced rate. We also see our maintenance supplies that I mentioned before, looking to request an increase there of about 40,000. Increased vandalism has been a significant issue, which costs a lot of money to repair. And we've also seen those costs for, as I mentioned, lumber and plumbing and electrical go up. And then every 4th October, we need to put aside $100,000 for election costs, to share election costs, because we share with 4 different municipalities and local governments. And that's usually what the bill comes in at. And that, that's a one-time, comes out next year, but we need to budget for it. And so, the budget is dynamic. The presentation that I have today has already changed today, from what I had ready for you yesterday. It'll continue to change. We always learn something new, something changes, but at this point, unknown. Health benefit rates for teachers and principals. What to put in the budget and whether there'll be any funding from the ministry for COVID-19 protocols. Compensation increases for teachers, QP and USW. Bargaining is underway, waiting to hear. Compensation increases for principal, vice principal, and exempt employees. Boards are required to pay for that out of their own budget. No funding comes for those employee groups. It's usually tied to what they're permitted to, what boards are permitted to provide to their employees is usually tied to what the teachers have. So we don't know. Employee future benefits carrying cost. Every year, the board sets aside almost $500,000 to pay for retirement benefits based on the USW and QP collective agreements. Every 3 years, we have to submit a significant data set to an actuarial firm who readjusts the amount that has to be set aside every year. Could go up, could go down. I think it's probably going to go down because interest rates are going up so quickly, and that creates, you need to put aside less money today to have the money in the bank in the future if you're making more interest on it. But we'll wait and see. That's still to come. So here we go. Not to scare you, because we haven't touched surplus yet. But starting at the top, what's changed? I showed you that the grant's gone up by 460,000. We haven't had the little bit of grant funding that usually comes to the ministry announced yet, and that just relates to FSA marking and a few other small things. We've upped the industry training authority, but we've correspondingly upped the careers expenditures down below. We've upped the international and out-of-province tuition fees, but we correspondingly updated their expenditures down below. And we use surplus this year to help balance the budget, and we haven't brought any in yet. So right there is a pressure of about 676,000. I've just walked you through all the other items of wage increments, enrollment for teachers, the stats, the health benefits, diesel fuel, election, etc. We had a significant capital transfer in this year's budget that's come out that helps, and some miscellaneous adjustments. So we start with about 2.4 million to begin to balance the budget from. Again, haven't brought in any surplus, and that's going to be, I think, a significant contributor to correcting that. I'm just going to pause here and see if there's any questions on this slide. I know I've got the screen and share, but if I take it out, I'm fearful I'll lose my split screen.
Trustee Thorne, did you have a question?
Oh, yeah, I did. Jason, I'm going to thank you because you did prepare us ahead of time when we talked about budget before we started budget, that things are going to get tough and we'd have to swallow a hard pill. So for the work that you've done thus far, I'm starting to see what you mean. So I just wanted to make that comment that I'm glad you prepared us ahead of time. So thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I think, you know, it's not an insurmountable budget. I don't want that to be a scary number. Again, we haven't brought in any surplus, and I'm going to show you what that is. So budgeting and surpluses, there's 3 financial positions the board can find themselves in. Revenues exceed expenditures, you have a surplus. Revenues equal expenditures, you have a balanced position. That's literally impossible on a $100 million budget, but we'll have to be that accurate. Revenues are less than expenditures, a deficit position, not allowed to be in that position. So you want to be in a surplus position of some sort or close. The board, when you adopted your 2021-2022 amended annual budget in February, you had $3.3 million left. That's the most we had in unallocated surplus. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. And there's a number of reasons why that happened. But if we project a surplus of 1.2 million, that actually means the board has about 4.5 million projected for the end of this school year. I wouldn't recommend using it all, partly because we need to be certain that we're looking at it on a 3-year financial plan basis. But based on maintaining 1 to 3%, you need to make sure that you've got between 940,000 and 2.8 million in surplus contingency to be compliant with your policy. And here it is. This is what it looks like. We actually used less money than we thought we were going to need to balance this year's budget due to a number of circumstances. Mainly it was this return of students from distributed learning where they were funded less back into the classroom, and then that huge amount of growth. That 400 additional students came, didn't cost what the board received in additional funding, which is why we have so much more surplus this year. So you have about 4.77%. This chart is to show you kind of where it's been. The blue line is what you've utilized to balance a budget, and the orange line is what your contingency fund has been over the last 6 years. I don't have a blue line under 2021, because nothing's been brought in to help balance that budget, or nothing's been proposed to help balance that budget. But the anomaly here, if you look at the orange line, where did that big jump come from? It came from the 2020-2021 year, this year. No, actually, sorry, that's last year. It came from the 2021 year last year. And that resulted we would just say that's a COVID anomaly, where additional 3.8 million came in from the federal and provincial governments, and things were moved all over the place. And we ended up with more surplus. We didn't have in-service that happened during a COVID year. There were a lot of reasons. We had a lot of supply budgets unexpended, field trips not happening. It was an anomaly. But it's here now and able to assist in, with the addition of this year to helping balance next year. And so how is the board going to make decisions on how to balance the budget? You have a lot of meetings and work ahead. There's going to be a survey and the partner group meetings and public comments. Those will all be compiled for you. The strategic plan will be utilized and aligned to, and the budget guiding principles will be brought into conversations as well. There is a surplus being forecasted for this year, and you can choose to bring some of that in to help offset what I've shown you with the inflationary pressures. And there may be other areas, and I know there are. If the motion that was just recommended to the board is adopted, that supports one of your 4 areas of the strategic priorities, the early learning manager. And you may want to put some additional continuation of COVID safety protocols in place. We don't know what that looks like yet, but you may want a contingency at least for that. I'm going to look at a little bit on the funds. The Classroom Enhancement Fund, normally the ministry does not announce 100% of funding at the start of the year. They have this time. So there's less risk in budgeting within the Costume Enhancement Fund. Their preliminary allocation is 100% of last year at $8.9 million. That's just for the teachers, additional teachers for cost, size, and composition. Overhead costs aren't adjusted for inflation. They still remain at 877,000. I believe if funding comes in, there are some staff members in there that are QP. There's some EAs in there. So if there's a wage increase, that funding that will come in will likely come in there as well. And it's used, this overhead is just used for the incremental costs. We have about 5.7 FTE teachers. We have a human resource support position, and we have a lot of Pro-D funding for teachers in there. We've got a little bit more money under Learning Improvement Fund. So this supports education assistants who get another hour a week to do collaboration work. We have Community Link up slightly, so inflationary up slightly with inflation. And the annual facilities grant has actually gone up by about $50,000. And you may want to consider, as budget options are brought forward, access to some of the capital reserves. So some things that end up in the budget proposals may be eligible either as operating or as capital. So what do you have left? Reconciliation here. After the couch and secondary contribution commitments come out, local capital has about $625,000 remaining. Ministry restricted 1.6 million. So you have some funding in your capital reserves as well. Just highlighted here because we may come back to that. And here's what's left. There's a budget survey that's planned, announced to be planned for release at the end of this week. And a summary will be presented to the board at the April 26th special board education and business committee. Partner group meetings scheduled for April 1st and April 8th. We'll put budget on the board meeting next week and talk about where we're at on developing options, but probably not likely present them there. We will have those options ready at April 14th. Then the advisory committee will provide feedback on the 19th, and there'll be a public meeting on that same day following the advisory. And then all of that will be reviewed, explored, and a draft budget development instructions will hopefully be issued to staff at April 26th to bring back a balanced budget. We'll hold a special BEBC meeting on April 28th. That's a Thursday, and hope that that will be where the board, where the committee makes a recommendation to the board. And then the board will have the option on May the 3rd of fully adopting. It doesn't have to be adopted until the end of June, but they don't see, we're not waiting for any funding announcements like we have in previous years related to the Classroom Enhancement Fund. So you can adopt all three motions there, and then staffing begins May the 4th. And yeah, there it is. That's this opening position, and all I have for you on budget this evening.
Thank you, Jason, for that very comprehensive presentation. Trustees, any questions at this time? Is there anything left unsaid, actually? Okay, thank you, Jason.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That. More to come.
Definitely more to come. I think we gave you more than we usually do coming out of spring break. Typically, we just start with revenue and not as detailed the position, but respecting our timelines, there's a little bit more this evening. I have one more item, actually there's two more items on the agenda. The first relates to out-of-province fees, which is becoming a new business with academy approvals. Students that come in from out of province to study in the Cowichan Valley, so they're Canadian students. The funding isn't provided by the Ministry of Education for those students. So, like an international student, the board has the ability to set fees related to those students and tuition rates. We this year set the rate really at what we would call the First Nations block rate. And what that does is it collects all the funding that the school district receives from the province and divides it by the number of students to get a per pupil rate. And it was just over $12,000. So this year, we had to kind of scramble and set a rate as the academies were approved towards the right at the end of the year. We set a rate of 12,400, and which was a little bit over the First Nations block rate. But what that does is that reimburses the board for the cost of education, including capital and all in. So we would be recommending, sort of as a minimum that the board set a rate there. And we do have a motion that looks at establishing an out-of-province tuition rate at 12,400 for 2022-2023, and then reviewing that. Some districts align with their international rate and some districts don't. It's really all over the map as to what districts charge for out-of-province. And there aren't that many students at this time, but it is something to be reviewed, I think, for 2023, 2024 to see where the appropriate balance lies.
Thank you, Sanquist. Is there a mover for that motion? Trustee DeGroot, Trustee Kimmler is seconding. Any discussion on it? Calling the question. Oh, sorry, Trustee Thorne.
Yeah, I was hoping that we would, I approve the motion definitely, but I think we should have followed the international rate. I think that would be more appropriate. I'm only thinking of the transportation concerns. They raised theirs by $50, I think it was, and something else by $50. It should be something we should consider.
Mr. Sanquist, can we do that now, or is that for the review process for 23-24?
It really is all inclusive of the funding that the board receives for transportation, because it takes everything that the province gives the board. So it's basically giving you, the board, the equivalent funding to what a student you'd receive for a student if they were a BC student at the rate that's been set here. So I think it's already built in, Trustee Thorne's concern.
Thank you. Calling the question, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
Okay, one last thing.
Last one is policy.
Yes. So what we identified is that the board's policy 2 role of the board includes the approval of academy fees, and it includes the approval of international student fees, but it doesn't currently include the approval of out-of-province fees. So we have made a recommendation, and I'm just, if I share the screen, I'll have it for you. Why it's not sharing? There's agenda. So when we go to the board's, I'm looking for the highlighted section, excuse me, fiscal accountability section of policy 2 role of the board, we're recommending in 8.14, where previously said approval fee schedules for academies international students, we want to add and out-of-province students, or believe the board should add out-of-province students to the policy.
And you have a recommendation that you wrote for us?
Thank you. Next chair.
So Trustee DeGroot, I saw your hand up. Are you moving that motion? And seconded by Trustee Croft. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Any other business? Well, thank you, everyone. And I guess we'll be seeing you next week. So a motion to adjourn. Trustee Thorne, Trustee Croft, all those in favor? Motion carried.